Today's topic is hemodynamics or the dynamics of blood flow. That is the movement of blood across the blood vessels in the body. So as we go through this topic, you have to just go back to your intermediate physics and rewind some of the concepts from there. So before going into the actual topic, we have to just discuss the functional organization and structure of the vascular system, how the blood vessels of the body are organized. So first of all, what are the functions of the blood circulation? It supplies the tissues of various organs with nutrient substances like oxygen, carbohydrates, fats, hormones, etc. And it removes waste products of tissue metabolism. And it controls the blood flow to the skin and limbs to regulate heat loss to the environment, that is thermoregulation. And it aids in the body's defense mechanism by delivering antibodies, platelets and leukocytes to the affected areas of the body. So to perform all these various body functions, vascular system is organized into two separate circulations, that is systemic and pulmonary, which are arranged in series. And in addition to these series arrangement of vascular system, there is one more parallel attachment to the circulation of blood, that is lymphatic circulation, which helps the blood circulation to perform all its functions. So here we can see the systemic and pulmonary circulations which are arranged in series. So this is the right side of the heart and left side, that is left atrium and left ventricle. So first of all, the blood, deoxygenated blood from the head, that is above the heart level, and from the below the heart level, from all the structures, the deoxygenated blood will enter into the right atrium, and from there right ventricle, and through the pulmonary trunk, pulmonary arteries, which will enter into the both the lungs, and there the blood will be oxygenated or purified, and then through the pulmonary veins it enters the left atrium, and from there the left ventricle, and from there the large artery, that is aorta, which is going dividing into the descending aorta to the one branch to the head and neck, and the systemic aorta to the whole body. So this is how the systemic and pulmonary circulations are arranged in the body. So we will see the structure of blood vessel. So as you all know, any blood vessel is having three layers: intima, media and adventitia. The tunica intima is the innermost layer of the blood vessel, which consists of a single continuous layer of endothelial cells. It forms the barrier between the blood and the remainder of the vessel wall. Its smooth luminal surface facilitates the efficient blood flow by reducing surface friction, and it is separated from the media by internal elastic lamina. And coming to the most important part, that is tunica media, which consists of a vascular smooth muscle cells. So these smooth muscle cells are innervated by sympathetic nerve fibers. So thus it helps in the regulation of blood flow and blood pressure. So this vascular smooth muscle is of two types: single unit or visceral type and multi-unit. The single unit with smooth muscle fibers have the inherent property of myogenic activity to stretch, and which is mainly present in the small arteries, arterioles and meta-arterioles, whereas the multi-unit smooth muscle fibers are not excited by stretch. And the last layer is the tunica adventitia, which is made up of collagen and fibroblasts. It contains necessary nerves and blood vessels, that is vasa vasorum. So these are the three layers of the blood vessel. In this picture also you can see the three layers: externa, media and the intima. So coming to the types of blood vessels. So there are 5 types, as you can see here: Windkessel or distensible vessels, resistance vessels, exchange vessels, capacitance vessels, shunt or thoroughfare vessels. Okay, we will see each one. So these are the various types of vessels. You can see on the arterial side, large artery, elastic artery, and then muscular artery, the division of the large artery, and then further branches are called arterioles and then capillaries. So capillaries, you can see here, continuous capillary and then fenestrated capillary. And again here on the venous side, you can see the venules, medium-sized veins and the large veins. So here in the capillaries, you don't see the vascular smooth muscles. So now we will see the first type of vessels, that is Wien-Kessel or distensible vessels. These are the vessels which are highly elastic. Wien-Kessel means elastic reservoir. So the examples for these types of vessels are aorta, pulmonary artery and their large branches. So the blood which is ejected from the heart is in the pulsatile fashion. So this pulsatile ejection has to be converted to steady flow in the capillaries to get the maximum exchange of nutrients between the blood vessels. So what how this pulsatile ejection of blood flow is converted to steady flow means is because of this Wien-Kessel effect. The elastic recoil of the arterial system, that is the stretch produced during the cardiac contraction of the walls of the elastic tissues of the aorta and its large branches, comes back to regain its original position during the diastolic phase. Okay, so during the systolic phase, the blood has ejected out of the heart and it is flowing through the aorta and its large branches. So while it is flowing, the recoil effect of the elastic tissues of the walls of the aorta, this recoil, so it is first stretching and then coming back again. So this recoil effect is called the Wien-Kessel effect. So this occurs during the diastolic phase of the heart. And the resistance to outflow offered by the peripheral arterioles is called peripheral resistance. The next type of vessels are resistance vessels. So these are the vessels which offer resistance to the blood flow towards the capillaries, also called as precapillary sphincters. And the examples for these resistance vessels are arterioles, meta-arterioles, precapillary sphincters. So the arterioles are the maximum resistance blood vessels which offer resistance to blood flow towards the capillaries and are the main site of peripheral resistance. So the skin and the skeletal muscle blood vessels represent the most important site of peripheral resistance and offer maximum resistance to blood flow. So exchange vessels, the vessels which allow easy exchange of gases and nutritive substances across them. So the common example is the capillaries. So capillaries do not have vascular smooth muscle and then they are having the single layer of endothelial layer, and then these are of three types: continuous or non-fenestrated, fenestrated or the pores type, and then discontinuous or sinusoid type of capillaries. So the capillaries are the major site of exchange, and if you take the cross-sectional area of the total capillary bed in the body, it will be accounting to 4,000 times that of aorta cross-sectional area. So in this picture you can see the interaction of molecules flowing in and out of blood at a capillary bed. So oxygen and nutrients cross to the body cells and carbon dioxide and metabolic waste products cross into the blood. The next type of vessels are capacitance vessels. So these vessels can accommodate large volume of blood per unit length without much increase in the transmural pressure. So the common example for this capacitance vessels are venules and the venous compartments. So in this picture you can see the veins amount to the 54%, that is majority of the systemic circulation, and the capillaries 5%, arteries 11%, and the heart accounts to 12% of the blood, and the pulmonary circulation amounts to 18% of the blood. So these veins have greater capacity for blood containment than arteries. They have thin walls They are very flaccid, less muscular and elastic tissue, and they collapse when they become empty, and they can expand easily, and they have steady blood flow, and they can merge to form larger veins, and subjected to relatively low blood pressure, that is remains 10 mmHg with little fluctuation. Next type of vessels are shunt or thoroughfare vessels. These are the vessels which bypass the capillaries, and they directly connect the meta-arterioles with venules, also called as arteriovenous shunts or AV shunts or AV anastomosis. So in this picture you can see there is a direct connection between the arterioles and venules. So here also you can see the AV shunt or AV anastomosis, anything we can call. So these vessels occur in few tissues, most notably in the skin. So important sites are the areas exposed to maximal cooling like skin, toes, legs, fingers, palms, etc. So these vessel walls have strong muscular coats innervated by sympathetic nerve fibers. So when the fully constricted state, they decrease the blood flow into the veins, or when they are maximally dilated, they cause extremely rapid flow of warm blood into the veins. So thus these vessels are very helpful during the thermal stress in the skin. So coming to the innervation of the blood vessels, the smooth muscles, as I have already told you, they are innervated by the sympathetic fibers which contain the alpha adrenergic receptor. Therefore, noradrenaline causes contraction of the fibers leading to the vasoconstriction. So these sympathetic fibers exert a tonic effect even at rest. So this line is important. Even at rest, the sympathetic fibers exert the tonic effect, resulting in existence of vasomotor tone in the blood vessels. So there is a vasomotor tone present in the blood vessels, vascular smooth muscle, even at rest. Okay. And the stimulation of sympathetic fibers increases the vasomotor tone, and which result in the constricted and narrowed blood vessels. And whereas the opposite, when the inhibition of sympathetic discharge happens, it results in decreased vasomotor tone and vasodilation. So coming to our main topic, that is dynamics of blood flow, or the general principles governing the blood flow, or the various factors affecting the blood flow. So the simple term for this is hemodynamics, which is the study of forces involved in the circulating blood throughout the body. So to understand this principles of blood flow, we have to know the flow pressure resistance relationship. So only this thing we will see in our today's class, and the other factors like velocity of blood flow we will see in the next class. So in this picture you can see the pressures in systemic circulation and pulmonary circulation. So systemic circulation is otherwise called high pressure system, and whereas the pulmonary circulation is called low pressure system. So because you can see here the pressures ranging from 0 to 120, starting in the aorta the pressure is ranging from 80 to 120. Okay, so aorta, and then large arteries, small arteries, arterioles and capillaries, venules, small and large veins, and then vena cava. So till the arterioles, till here the pressure is very high, and from the capillaries area the pressure is gradually decreasing, and in the venous side completely the pressure is near to zero. And then on the pulmonary side again it will be rising only up to the 20 mmHg pressure. Okay, so that is why the pulmonary circulation is called low pressure system and the systemic circulation is called high pressure system. So the relationship between the flow of fluid with the pressure of fluid and the resistance offered to the flow of fluid while it is flowing through a rigid tube is studied by a French physiologist named Poiseuille in 1842 and also his co-worker Hagen. So this relationship is known as Poiseuille's law or Poiseuille-Hagen law. So these two persons, Poiseuille and then Hagen, studied the relationship between the flow of a fluid with the pressure of fluid and then resistance offered by the fluid when it is flowing through a rigid tube. So they have taken the basic formula of current is equal to voltage by resistance and converted into the blood dynamics, like flow of blood is equal to pressure difference between the ends by the resistance offered by the tube. So this is the relationship between flow, pressure and resistance. But this relationship was valid for the flow of blood through the rigid tube, and the fluid has to be Newtonian. Newtonian fluid means the fluid which is not affected by the flow rate. But this is not possible in the real life. So the blood vessels are not rigid in the body and the blood is not a Newtonian fluid, and therefore strictly speaking the law does not apply to the flow of blood through the vascular system in the body. But the important principles relating the flow, pressure and resistance remain applicable to the body. So Q is equal to delta P by R, that is blood flow is equal to pressure difference or pressure gradient divided by the resistance. In case of fluids, R, that is resistance, is determined by other factors like length of the tube, viscosity of the fluid and radius of the tube. So from these, taking these factors into consideration, the formula can be rewritten as R is equal to 8 into length and viscosity by pi multiplied by R to the power of 4. So again we can convert this resistance, that is R is equal to delta P by Q. So we can replace R with Q and P. So Q is equal to delta P multiplied by pi R to the power of 4 divided by 8 into length into viscosity of the fluid. So this is the Poiseuille-Hagen formula, that is flow of blood Q is equal to P pi R power 4 by 8 eta L, that is length and the viscosity of the fluid. So this picture shows the relationship between the flow and pressure in a graphical form. So the normal rigid tube relationship of flow and pressure in a rigid tube will be linear like this. So because it applies to the Newtonian fluid and also in a rigid tube. But in real life, it is not, the blood vessels are not rigid and the fluid is not Newtonian. That's why the graph will come like this curve. So this is in iota. And also in the next picture, you can see flow in the arterioles with autoregulation. So the relationship between the flow and pressure will be like this. So this linear line is in rigid tube. So this line is in arterioles with autoregulation. So what is autoregulation? The arterioles are having the smooth muscle which is having the inherent property of ability to respond to the stretch, that is myogenic property of the vascular smooth muscle, which helps in the auto-regulation of the pressure changes in the arterioles. So it can maintain the flow over a wide range of pressure changes, that is 80 to 200 mm Hg. So coming to the important concept of critical closing pressure. So it is defined as the pressure at which vessel collapses. So normally in the body, the pressure in the vessels, blood vessels, is required to push the RBCs when they are passing through the very narrow sized or small diameter capillaries. To push those 7.5 micron sized RBCs through the capillaries, pressure is required. And also to counteract the intramural, to counteract the tissue pressure, to keep the vessels patent and maintain the blood flow. For these two factors, some intramural pressure is required for the blood vessels. But when the vessel is collapsing, so when it is happening, when there is severe vasoconstriction, and this closing of the blood vessel occurs because the tissues are the vessels are surrounded by tissues which apply external pressure on them, leading to the closure. So for arteries it is around 20 mmHg. If the pressure falls below this level, then only the blood flow stops. So this does not hold good for the flow of blood through rigid tubes, and it also changes with the state of blood and blood vessel. So for whole blood, if you take, the CCP is 20 mmHg, and for plasma it is 5 to 10 mmHg, and during sympathetic stimulation the pressure will be higher, that is 60 mmHg, and during the sympathetic inhibition it will be almost or equal to 0 mmHg, that is no pressure at all. So this is again the graphical representation of flow and pressure relationship. This is for rigid tube and this is for the blood vessel, normal blood vessel, and it is for the sympathetic stimulation of the blood vessel, which depicts the critical closing pressure, that is at 60 mmHg. If the pressure falls below the 60 mmHg, here the blood flow will stop and the vessel collapses. So I hope you understood this concept of critical closing pressure and also the relationship between the flow and pressure. So next, coming to the most important topic, that is Laplace law. It governs the relationship between the distending pressure and tension in the wall of a distensible viscous, including the blood vessels. So you can formulate it as tension is equal to pressure into radius divided by width of the vessel wall. So simply you can frame it as P is equal to tension by radius. So if you take a hollow viscous, distensible viscous, the relationship between the distending pressure and the tension in the wall, so that relationship is given as P is equal to T by R. So from the relationship we can say that smaller is the radius of the blood vessel, lesser is the tension on the walls of the blood vessel required to balance the distending pressure or the force, that is P. So if you see in the different blood vessels, like in aorta it is having highest tension, and inferior vena cava 21,000 dynes per centimeter, and capillaries with lowest tension. So these capillaries are thin walled and yet do not rupture because the tension and both the pressure is also less in the capillaries. So if we see the physiological implications of the Laplace law, we can apply in the blood vessel, alveoli, and in GI tract for during defecation and in urinary bladder. So in the hollow viscous organs like urinary bladder, ventricles or alveoli of lungs, the wall tension depends on the distending pressure and its radius. So the wall tension increases when the organ gets filled, that is distending pressure rises, or the cavity size increases, and vice versa. In lungs, the radii of curvature of alveoli becomes smaller during expansion, and these structures would tend to collapse because of pull of surface tension if the tension were not reduced by the surface tension lowering agents, that is surfactant. Okay, so wall tension increases when the organ gets filled or the cavity size increases, but in the lungs it is during the expiration the tendency to collapse is reduced by the surface tension reducing agents, like that is surfactant. And what happens in the bladder you already know. So this law is having one disadvantage, which is faced by the dilated heart. So when the radius of the cardiac chamber is increased, a greater tension must be developed in the myocardium to produce any given pressure, more so because the ventricular wall is not thick in the dilated heart. So in the dilated heart, the ventricular wall is not thick to produce the more amount of pressure required to pump out the blood from the cardiac chambers. So that is the main disadvantage of the dilated heart. So a dilated heart pumps less efficiently. So we have seen the flow, pressure, resistance till now. So now we will see the flow resistance relationship. Flow is inversely proportional to the resistance, that is Q is equal to 1 by R, and that resistance is represented by 8 length into viscosity divided by pi R power 4. So resistance depends on length, 4th power of radius of the tube, and viscosity of the fluid. In the vascular system, resistance to flow is represented by total peripheral resistance, TPR, and which is expressed as peripheral resistance unit. So what are these two, TPR and PRU? We will see in the next slide. The peripheral resistance unit, how you can understand this? So till now we have seen the Poiseuille's law, which is considered analogous to the Ohm's law, that is current is equal to voltage by resistance. So flow is equal to flow, that is Q or ml per second, is equal to pressure gradient by resistance. So we have to get resistance now. So from this formula, R is equal to pressure gradient by blood flow. Therefore, in the vascular system, PRU is represented by units mmHg per ml per second. So this is the peripheral resistance unit. And the next one, total peripheral resistance. At rest, the resistance of the entire systemic circulation is called total peripheral resistance. So the values for this is 1 PRU, that is 1 mmHg per ml per second. That is nothing but total peripheral resistance of the entire systemic circulation. So TPR during maximum vasoconstriction may increase to 4 peripheral resistance units, and during maximum vasodilation it decreases to 0.2 peripheral resistance units. So pulmonary vascular resistance is only about 0.1 to 0.2 peripheral resistance units. So coming to the major factors that determine the resistance to blood flow, like the viscosity of blood and the radius of blood vessels. So first of all, the viscosity of blood. So what is the viscosity? It is described as internal friction to the flow in a fluid or lack of slipperiness. So the lamina in the fluid slip on one another and move at different speeds, causing a velocity gradient in a direction perpendicular to the wall of the tube. So this velocity gradient is called shear rate. So a simple viscous fluid is known as Newtonian fluid, which is having the viscosity which does not vary with the shear rate and remain constant at different rates of laminar flow. So the resistance met by the fluid during moving through a tube in a streamlined flow is due to the friction between the adjacent lamina and not due to the friction between the vessel wall and the fluid. So the unit of viscosity is poise. Coming to the factors affecting the blood viscosity, the first and foremost is the shear rate or velocity gradient between the laminae of the fluid. So the viscosity of blood decreases as shear rate or velocity gradient increases. So what happens at higher shear rates? What happens? The central part is occupied by the RBC and peripheral parts of the blood vessel are cell-free. So this process is called plasma skimming. So this increases the what it does, it causes least friction between the cells and plasma, and viscosity decreases. And at higher flow rates, the fluid behaves like a Newtonian fluid and the viscosity will be constant. And reverse happens when the shear rate or velocity gradient decreases. And considering the hematocrit, it directly affects the blood viscosity. When the hematocrit is more, viscosity is more. Okay, direct relationship. In vitro, relative viscosity of blood increases proportionally with the increase in hematocrit. Whereas in vivo, the effect of increased hematocrit on viscosity is affected by the diameter of blood vessels. So how the diameter of blood vessel affects the viscosity? So the relationship between the viscosity and the diameter of the blood vessel is expressed as Forest-Lindquist effect, after the name of the workers who discovered this effect. So according to their observations, the viscosity of blood in the vessels with diameter less than 300 micrometers is less than the viscosity of blood in larger diameter vessels. So this effect was observed only when the experiments were performed using blood and not with the water and plasma. So how this effect is produced? The RBCs present in the blood are deformable in nature, so that apparent viscosity of blood does not change while passing through a tube of smaller diameter. Due to phenomena of plasma skimming in the large and moderate size vessels, the blood that enters the small vessels like capillaries will be having less hematocrit. The width of the cell-free zone at the periphery is constant, whatever may be the tube diameter, and correspondingly occupies the bigger portion in the narrow tubes. As a result, total relative viscosity is less in small diameter vessels. Because of this effect, a satisfactory flow rate exists even in the blood vessels whose diameter are small. So, in addition, there is a suggestion that capillary endothelial cells secrete a substance which further helps to lower the viscosity of blood in the capillaries. Okay, you can see in higher flow rates, the RBCs are placed in the center, leaving a cell-free peripheral zone which is called plasma skimming effect. So because of this plasma skimming effect in large medium-sized vessels, blood that enters the capillaries will be having less hematocrit. That is, RBCs are not entered into the capillaries much. Whereas in small sized arteries, because of this not presence of the plasma skimming effect, even into the capillaries there is sufficient flow of entry of RBCs into the capillaries. So this explains the flow rate which exists even in the blood vessels with smaller diameters. So what is the applied aspect of this Forest-Lindquist effect is that because of this effect, hematocrit changes have relatively little effect on the resistance except when the changes are large. So one more factor we have seen affecting the viscosity of blood fluid is the temperature. So cooling increases the viscosity of blood, and when the temperature increases, viscosity decreases. So pathological conditions associated with high blood viscosity are severe polycythemia, abnormal shaped RBCs like congenital spherocytosis, and abnormally high immunoglobulin level and lowered body temperature. So finally, to summarize, viscosity of blood is inversely proportional to flow rate or shear rate and temperature within the limit, and then directly proportional to the hematocrit, that is packed cell volume, and the concentration of plasma proteins, especially the immunoglobulins, and the diameter of vessel walls. Okay. So next we will see the radius of vessels. The rate of flow is proportional to the fourth power of radius of the blood vessels. Thus, even a small change in the caliber of blood vessels will produce a marked change in the blood flow. So you can see here the relationship between the radius and the flow rate. So only for small change in the radius of the blood vessel, the flow rate is increasing very proportionately. That is from 1 to 256 only with increase in 3 mm of the diameter of the radius of the blood vessel. So among the blood vessels, aorta and large arteries, there is only little resistance, and the arterioles are the major seat of vascular resistance because of the small bored vessels, that is 30 micrometers in diameter, and presence of large amount of smooth muscle. I told you, the arterioles are having vascular smooth muscle, more vascular smooth muscle, which is having the property of auto-regulation. So the constriction of arterioles increases the resistance and decrease blood flow, while the dilatation does the opposite action. So control of blood flow to organs or tissues is thus regulated primarily by altering the radius of the arterioles, because they are considered as the stop cogs of the circulation. In our body, the arterioles are in large bulk in splanchnic region and skeletal muscles and constitute the major site of peripheral resistance. Because of their characteristics, arterioles play important role in the function of control of blood flow during alteration in the blood pressure and the control of blood flow following the occlusive ischemia and control of blood flow during exercise. So in all these functions, the arterioles play very important role. So I hope you all understood the relationship of flow, pressure, resistance, and then the velocity of blood flow. So we will see the next blood flow types and measurement and the changes in blood flow in the next class. Thank you all.